Thanks so much for joining us today for Textile Talks. I am Emma Parker, the project manager at the Quilt Alliance. Thank you for joining us. We are going to debut excerpts from two brand new QSOS, or Quilters Save Our Stories, oral history interviews that were conducted in 2025. One with Dr. Tony Dickerson and one with Sheryl Sims. We are so excited to share these interviews with you, and I hope they get your juices flowing about recording your own quilt story or quilt stories in your community. Before we get started, though, a little bit of housekeeping. First, I hope you'll let us know if this is your first Textile Talk or your 100th. There's been many more than that. But Textile Talks is a free weekly series presented on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern by the Quilt Alliance and our three partner organizations who are shown here: the International Quilt Museum, the Studio Art Quilt Associates, and Surface Design Association. All the Textile Talks are recorded and available on YouTube. So if this is your first one and you want to go back and catch up on all of the ones that we've done since 2020, you can feel free. My colleague Lucy, hopefully, if I can ask her to enter the link for that YouTube recording playlist, it'll be in the chat box in just a few minutes. And I'll also ask Lucy to share a link to our Textile Talks donation page. This is free because it's supported by our sponsors and by donors like you. And your support in any amount is definitely appreciated. Absolutely. For those of you who have not heard of the Quilt Alliance, one of the partners for Textile Talks, our mission is to document, preserve, and share the stories of all quilts and all quilt makers. Our goal is no more anonymous quilters. Our projects include Quilters Save Our Stories, or QSOS, which is what we're focusing on today, and that's a collection of oral history interviews by quilters with quilters. Anyone can participate in the project, and those interviews are archived with our partners at the Library of Congress and the University of Kentucky's Louis B. Nunn Center for Oral History. QSOS was launched 27 years ago. Is that right? Yes, in 1999. So we are so excited to continue building this amazing collection of interviews with quilt makers. We also have a video documentation project called Go Tell It, and anyone who can share a quilt story can participate. I'll put a link shortly in the chat to the Quilt Alliance website, and you can find out more about our projects and consider becoming a member or donor to support our work recording quilt stories. For a quick reminder about some tech things, we are going to have a live Q&A today with our two QSOS interviewees. So if you have a question that you'd like to ask, I ask that you put it in the Q&A box and reserve that for questions for our Q&A. You are more than welcome to use the chat box for everything else. Otherwise, questions just get a little bit lost in the mix if you put them there. If you have any technical issues, feel free to let us know. We'll be trying to keep an eye on the chat. And you can send that just directly to the panelists and presenters. Otherwise, you can change your settings to message everyone if you'd like to share a message with all the attendees on the talk today. You'll also want to look for a survey that will pop up in your browser when we complete today. Your commentary and suggestions for improvement are so appreciated. They really help us mold this series. We've also have a live captioner, so you can use Zoom's closed caption feature. If you prefer not to view captions or to turn them on, you can look for a setting that says CC or Live Captions button. It'll depend what it's called and where you find it based on your Zoom setup and what device you're using. But feel free to turn them on or off as you need. All right, I think that's all my housekeeping. We are so thrilled and honored to present two fairly newly conducted QSOS interviews today. And we're going to have the interviewees, Dr. Tony Dickerson and Sheryl Sims, with us. We'll reserve about 10 to 15 minutes at the end of our program for a Q&A with them. So you don't have to hold your questions. You can share them in the Q&A as you think of them, and we'll revisit them for sure. We don't always get to share every interview we do, but my colleague Amy Milne did both of these interviews via Zoom, and we just really enjoyed hearing from Tony and Sheryl, so we wanted to share them with you. So I really do hope this gets your wheels turning about who in your life you might like to interview for this project, or who in your life you might ask to interview you. First, we're going to hear the interview with Dr. Toni Dickerson, who's the founding president of the Acoma and Toso Modern Quilt Guild of Central Indiana. She also holds a doctorate of education in education leadership and policy studies, so aware of many hats. She makes quilts that are both personal and works that honor the political, social, and literary heritage of our country. We'll hear a snippet of her interview first, and then we'll hear from Sheryl Sims. Sheryl is an artist and quilter living in Virginia, where she makes quilts. And in 2024, she concluded a term as the Commissioner of the Arts in Alexandria, Virginia. Her quilts explore family history, faith, the commemoration of historic moments, among many other themes. So we're just going to hear the first 20 minutes of each interview. I'm sorry for an abrupt cutoff, but I will share the link to the full interview for both interviews in the chat. So I hope that you will definitely want to hear the rest. This is just kind of a little teaser for both. And then after we watch the recorded interviews, we will have a chance for Q&A. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. All right.
Hi, this is Amy Milne. I'm the director of the Quilt Alliance, and I'm conducting a QSOS interview with Dr. Toni Dickerson. And today's date is Monday, March 17th, 2025, and it's 3:10 p.m. And I'd like to thank you, Dr. Dickerson, for doing this interview with me. And I'd like to ask you to tell me about the quilt that you brought to share.
All right. Good morning, or afternoon, I should say. Good afternoon. The quilt that I have behind me is special for a couple of reasons. Um, I started sewing at the age of 6, but I didn't start to quilt until I was 50. And I actually followed my mom in that way. Linda, my mother is from a little town in Kentucky. Her name was Linda Edwards Dickerson, my father, and then Lee for my father who raised me. So Linda Edwards Dickerson Lee, she didn't start quilting until she was 50. And so I did not grow up in a family full of quilters. And so unfortunately, I lost a great niece, Taylor Lee, to meningitis. She was only 6.5. And I had gone away to college and my mother was quilting. And I said, well, I heard that quilts can be made to honor someone who's passed on. And so I had sewn since I was 6, 4-H, home ec, done all of the things, made Cabbage Patch dolls when I was in college to pay bills. Um, I made teddy bears and I said I could probably quilt her something. So I found a pattern that was the flower basket. And I used that flower basket pattern to symbolize the fact that a lot of enslaved people could not afford to put a headstone on their loved ones. And so I figured I would create a flower basket in honor of honoring her now that she's an ancestor. So I made that quilt when Taylor passed away, and that was it. I just made that quilt. And my mother came to live with me after my father died, and she, of course, was quilting. She quilted by hand. And of course, I still wasn't quilting. And so dementia, unfortunately, started to creep in to my mom's life about 10 years before she passed. So in her late 70s. And a colleague was having a baby. And I said, I can make her a quilt. And so I made her a quilt. And I said, if I don't make quilts for my nieces and nephews and my mom is having dementia, then nobody is ever going to get a quilt. And so I started looking at videos to start figuring out how to do quilts. And Jenny Doan of Missouri Star Quilt, I loved her videos because she was Like she gets in and she gets out. 5-minute videos, 7-minute videos, and she's through. So I started looking for patterns. Pinterest became my friend, and I would just start looking at patterns for quilts and started making these patterns. And then I went to a meet and greet with Mary Ann Petway and China Petway in Kansas City, Missouri. And they, of course, when they do a presentation, it is, oh my gosh, it's everything. You know, they're quilting and they're singing and they're asking questions. And at the end of their session, their presentation, I asked the question, so what should I do now? Because your quilts are so dynamic and, you know, um, so fantastic. And I'm a new quilter. And, she said, stop looking at everybody else's work. Just do your own thing. Don't think that because we sew this way that you should mimic us. Just find your voice. Find your voice. It kept saying, find your voice. Well, I was so new to quilting, I didn't know what that meant to find my voice, find my voice. Well, I have a tattoo right here on my shoulder that I got from a girls' trip because of the fact that one of my besties um, told me I was a liar and I wasn't going to get this tattoo. And I said I was going to get the tattoo and you're not getting the tattoo. Well, that's because as a teacher, I've been in education going on 39 years. They were trying to give me an apple or a bookworm. And I'm like, if you're going to get your first tattoo in your 50s, you don't get a bookworm. You don't. So I said, we went to go look at the tattoos and we went back home and we were going back the next day because there was a group of us to get the tattoos. So of course, everybody's getting these tattoos. There are about 7 of us. And I just, I don't know. I'm not going to get a tattoo because I can't figure out anything. So I started looking up. I said, I know. Find a symbol. Find a symbol that might mean something. So as a teacher, one of my flexes, especially from where I'm from, and I was brought up in Indianapolis. The Indianapolis public school system was sued for de jure racism. Separate schools for Black students. In the 4th grade, I was forced busing. I went from school 69 out to the white suburbs and went to school 94. And in high school, I made the uh, honor roll every single semester, but nobody ever talked to me about going to school. No one ever took me on a college tour. My family were just hard workers, and I figured I'd graduate from high school, get a job. And then my sister got out of the Army and ended up at Lincoln University. And so when she ended up at Lincoln University, I went there, got my first degree. I said, well, maybe I can get my master's. And my principal pushed us to get our master's, and I got my master's. And then I was working at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and I got my ed spec. And I was getting ready, I was working on my doctorate. And I said, I know, find something that has something to do with being intelligent. Well, the Dame Dame is the game that they play in West Africa. And it's the symbol that means checkered, and it means intellectual integrity, problem solving. And I said, that's the tattoo I'm going to get. And I got that tattoo. And after I got that tattoo, I met the Petway sisters. And I said, I'll take that symbol and I'll create a quilt out of that symbol somehow, some way. And so that's the long way around to this quilt that's behind me. This is the Dame Dame symbol. It has the square in the middle, the 4 squares, and then the pieces that go out. And if you look at this quilt, every one of these is a Dame Dame. But it is just represented different ways. So this fabric is a Dame Dame. This small one in this piece is a Dame Dame. All of these are Dame Dames. And I had just taken a workshop. I have a good friend in the Sankofa Stitchers, Wanda Gikande, and she, um, after I lost my mom to Alzheimer's, and my niece died suddenly, also from COVID in 2019, right at the beginning. She invited me to a workshop with Shonda Kimber. And I went out there, and of course, she was doing letters. And so the lettering and the dame, they all kind of collided together. And the quilt actually says, finding myself is a constant reimagining of the intellectual constructs that I have been taught. And it was important to put that through because I think I live here. Like, even as a kid, I lived in my head. Um, I love metacognition. I know who I am. If you come in my home, I'm very much a square person. Like I like square things and I like things lined up. And I tell people I don't have OCD. I don't have OCD, but I don't like things to be crooked and I like it being a little folded is bothering me. So to have the things off centered, to have colors where maybe in this one you can't see the color, the dame, as well as you can see this one, like pushed me. It really, really pushed me. And at the same time, I'm learning about quilts are not just baby quilts. Quilts are not just pattern quilts. Quilts are not just utilitarian. And so all of this collided, and that's why I kind of wanted to show this quilt. The other thing, and I hope I don't get teary-eyed saying this, but the other thing is this quilt was quilted by my good friend Michael Stevens. And Michael was known as the not your average quilter. And if you Google him, his work is phenomenal. And Mike was actually the very first quilter that I met when I moved back home to Indianapolis. And when I met Mike, I was actually at another guild meeting. I had joined the Indianapolis Modern Quilt Guild, and I was there for a minute. And every meeting, Mike and I would sit by each other and talk. And I then learned he had a shop. And when I tell you, his quilt shop was heaven. The boutiques he had were, as soon as you walked into a really small area, and then you walk down a hallway, and all of his beautiful quilts would hang on the sides, and he had more fabric. And then you walked into his workshop and more fabrics. And he actually made the uniforms for the majorettes, like the flags, people during the band uniforms, but he also quilted fabulous quilts. And I told Mike, I said, I'm making this quilt that is not a pattern, and I don't know what to do with it in terms of quilting because I had learned how to long arm. And I had long arm quilts myself, but I didn't know what to do with this. And so Mike did this for me. And if you look, one of the things I always tell people is that if you find a great long armor, you never tell them what to do. You just say, I don't want the thread to show. I want the thread to be in the background. When you get the professional photo of this, you're going to see right here the leaves in the quilt blocks. He mimicked them in the quilting. The feathering that he put in here, the circles that he just kept replicating all around, speaks to his artistry. And unfortunately, Mike had an aneurysm and died suddenly. in 2023. So it's kind of apropos that the long way of why this particular quilt, when I do probably more portrait quilts and art quilts, is because I met the Petway sisters and they were like, do your own thing. I met Miss Kimber, and she was like, she taught me lettering and the way she does it. The fact that Wanda invited me out to her home and in New Jersey, and the Princeton Sankofa Stitchers loved on me when I needed it, and that Mike did the stitching for this beautiful quilt and just befriended me. There was never a time I went to a shop that he didn't give me a piece of something. I don't know what this is. You can have it. Look at this weird piece of thing that somebody gave me. You can have it. I told him that I was making a Mickey Mouse quilt for one of my great nieces. Oh, I got something you can have that has Mickey Mouse. And it was like an antique Mickey Mouse, Minnie and Mickey Mouse panel. And he would just do that. I got this bag that somebody donated. I don't think I'll ever do it. Would your guild like it? And that's just who Mike was. And so, yeah, so that quilt, this quilt, means a lot. In 2020, when I finished it, it also started our relationship, our guild's relationship, the Acomo and Toso Modern Quilt Guild of Central Indiana's relationship with the Center for Black Literature and Culture at the Indianapolis Public Library. And they started with putting this quilt uh, in their loft area. So when you walk in and you look up, there are two areas that they hang quilts, and this quilt hung for about a year in the library. And to date, they have continuously had our guild's quilts hanging in that library since 2020. And right now, they have our Alzheimer's quilt and another member's International Ladies quilt hanging up. So I would say that this quilt kind of got me into a different mode. Another quilt got me into another mode, and that was my art quilts. But this one just kind of collides with so many meaningful, um, meaningful happenings around quilting.
I can see why you chose it. And what a interesting way to tie together so many experiences and people, relationships, but also references, visually at least, the history of quilt making and making like it's almost like an album quilt.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Thank
Beautiful.
you.
So
Thank you.
you talked briefly about making quilts for family and you learned to sew from family, but what is your first memory of a quilt? Do you recall what your first memory of a quilt was?
I didn't grow up with quilts, so I don't have my first memory of a quilt. Um, Probably came from hearing the fact that I'm away living in Kansas City, Missouri. My mother here is in Indianapolis, and she's churning out quilts. And I'm like, Mama's making quilts? And they're like, yeah, she's on this quilt making kick. I didn't even ask her for one of them because it's like quilts didn't mean that to me. Like they didn't. And then I can even remember reading Everyday Use by Alice Walker and even using it as a short story in one of my classes. It didn't mean anything. Um, Toni Morrison is my all-time favorite author, and I read Beloved, taught Beloved, didn't mean anything. And so I don't have that memory of quilts in my life. They didn't mean anything like that. And that is so weird because I think what brought this to kind of fruition in terms of how quilts can still live in your subconscious. I have the oldest quilt that I have is probably going on 90 years old. It's on my ladder. It's a double wedding ring, and it came from Audrey Hale. I was 18 years old working at the St. Joseph Nursing Home, and there was a little elderly white lady who called us niggers. And, everybody disliked Audrey. Everybody disliked her. And I can remember telling Audrey, listen, Audrey, I can't have you calling me that every time I come into your room. And she just wouldn't stop it. Well, Audrey ate oatmeal every day. The discs in her back were disintegrating and she was in pain all the time. And so she ate oatmeal every day. And I remember I was assigned to work with her and I was assigned to make her oatmeal. And everybody else just took her oatmeal, heated up some water, mixed it up, and said, here. That's not how I ate oatmeal. So I took a bowl and I made the oatmeal and I put some sugar and a little butter and I made it the way I would eat oatmeal. And I gave it to Audrey. And Audrey went, what, what is this? What? Oh my goodness, what is this? This is delicious. And I'm like, that's just the way I make oatmeal. Oh my God. Could you make this for me all the time? Well, we'll see. And I hatched a plan. I made the oatmeal about 3 or 4 times in a row. To the point people used to get angry and said, listen, what did you do to the oatmeal? Because she says Tony's the only one who can make her oatmeal now. What did you do to the oatmeal? So I said, don't make her oatmeal that way. Give me a few more days. So I go into her room and I'm getting ready to make the oatmeal. And she said, oh, are you making my oatmeal, Tony? Hi, Tony. I said, I have a deal I need to make with you. I can't make you oatmeal anymore because you disrespect me and who I am as a person. What? I said, Audrey, I can't make you oatmeal anymore. I said, because you disrespect me, you call me names. No, that's just how I was raised. And, we all said the word. I wasn't raised that way. Matter of fact, I'm from the generation, if you call me that, I should be popping you real quick. But you're my elder, and I can't do that. And I have to have so much restraint. And I said, Audrey, nobody likes you. And I think you can change that. If you would just stop calling us that name. I'm going to try. I'm going to try. I would come back. Audrey, did you call anybody that word today? I didn't call anybody that word that day. Audrey, did you call it? I didn't call anybody that word that day. Fast forward, I go into Audrey's room and I said, Audrey, I have something sad to tell you. I'm graduating from school and I'm going to be a teacher. So that means I can't work here anymore. Oh, no, you can't leave me. I said, you're going to be okay. Well, I want to give you something. I said, well, what are you going to give me, Audrey? I want to give you one of my quilts. And I said, well, okay. Still, quilts meant nothing. Okay. Audrey tells her daughter, while I walk into the room, she tells her daughter, I need you to bring Tony one of my quilts. And her daughter's looking at me like, you're not getting one of my mama's quilts. And Audrey says, you bring her that quilt. It's my quilt and I want her to have it. And her daughter's just like, I said, I'll pay for the quilt. She was like, okay. She charged me $25 for the quilt. And I'm like, okay, you just gave me the quilt. Beautiful, beautiful double wedding ring. And I'll send you a picture of it. It was pristine until I found my mom using it. And so
All right. I warned you all that we were just going to have a little teaser. So I will share the link in the chat to the rest of this interview. We're going to end with that incredible story, and you can learn more about what happened to this quilt by watching. We're going to go next to hear from Sheryl Sims, and then we're going to have both Dr. Dickerson and Sheryl come join us in just a moment. So here's another little snippet, but please know that you can keep watching at the link that I've shared.
Okay, hi, I am Amy Milne with the Quilt Alliance, and I'm so pleased to be interviewing Sheryl Sims today. And it is April 11th at 10:24 a.m. And we're interviewing Sheryl for the Quilters Save Our Stories Oral History Project. Thank you, Sheryl, for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, what a treat for me too. And I would like to ask you first to show us the quilt that you are sharing today. Tell us a little bit about it. Tell us the title and why did you make this quilt?
Okay, so this quilt is actually a quilt about my second great grandmother, Cheney Tillman. She lived in Minden, Louisiana, and she was born into slavery and lived to be, I'm told, 100 years old. And she, I think, was released when she was about, I mean, she was still a young child when she was released. And I have a distant cousin who was telling me all about her. He remembered her when he was a child and visiting her after she had been freed and was later married. And he said she had this little house and her favorite thing to do was to garden. And so I took image, I imagined what he was saying into this quote. And I woke up one day and I just envisioned this. And I sat down to make it. And because I didn't have a picture of her, I didn't really know what she looked like. Gardening was perfect because she could have her head down. I didn't really have to, focus on her face. I did the little house in the background. And then I just incorporated some of my favorite things like the Van Gogh sky. Van Gogh used a lot of that blue and yellow, that sky effect. And I used perspectives. I don't know if you can see the perspective lines closely
Yes.
for my quilting lines. See, and you might notice that I use this raw edge applique to do it. So most of my quilts tell a story, and they talk about my family history.
And Cheney was, tell me a little bit about how you found out about Cheney.
So Cheney is my second great grandmother on my maternal side, and I found out about her doing my DAR research. I was trying to get into DAR. Took me 6 years because as an African American, it can be very difficult to find your roots because of slavery. You weren't a person. People didn't give they took away your name. You didn't, people didn't keep records. A lot of people didn't keep records on their enslaved people. So it was quite difficult. And then, I'm a military dependent. I was a military brat, grew up, born in Germany, moved all over. So it was, very difficult. My parents were only children and they were a little busy with 5 kids of their own. No one really knew this stuff. And genealogy wasn't a thing like it is now. So people just we didn't know. But when I got into DAR and the whole process of you have to find a patriot to be accepted, right? You have to do this research and you have to figure it out. So it turned out that my sixth great grandfather from North Carolina was my patriot. And he, of course, was a slave owner. And through him, we get to my fourth great grandfather, and he had enslaved my fourth great grandmother, had 2 children by her. I descend from the daughter, who's my third great grandmother, and and that's on my maternal line. And so from that, then we get to Cheney. And she's my great grandmother, my second great grandmother. So
So
it's an amazing history.
it really is. And it's so amazing that you were able to access that history I'm sure with a lot of hard work to try to make those connections. But can you explain just briefly what having a
So
patriot?
a patriot is someone that served in the Revolutionary War or contributed money for the cause. So my sixth great grandfather didn't fight in the war, but he gave money towards the effort. So if you can prove that somebody did that, then you can, be you can get into some of these lineage societies and DAR as Daughters of the American Revolution. So
Right.
your patriot would have served in that. So it's pretty ironic. Now, mind you, when you really think about it, you think about the Civil War. My people were on the wrong side of it, as far as I'm concerned. But the history is still there. Your history is your history, and through that history, I've met a lot of wonderful people, a lot of distant cousins. I mean, it's just been an amazing experience. And then I've learned so much about my family. I mean, I have a Quaker connection. I have a connection to Woodlawn Pope Leahy House, which is Nellie Custis's house. It was given to her by George and Martha Washington as a wedding gift. I'm a descendant, I'm related to Chalkley Gillingham, one of the former Quaker owners of Woodlawn. I mean, it's unbelievable.
That is so cool that you have been able to uncover these connections. And with that quilt, you have a label on that quilt.
I
Would you
did.
mind telling us what's on the label?
So there's the label. And it's very important that all of our quilts have labels, but it says Cheney Tillman, my second great grandmother. It says this quilt represents my maternal second great grandmother. She was born a slave in Louisiana and was later freed. According to my cousin Sonny Moore, who spent weekends with her as a child, she lived to be about 100 years old. She always cooked on an old wood burning potbelly stove. Cheney always woke up early in the morning and spent lots of time in her garden. She loved gardening. And I made this quilt in 2020 during the pandemic. So
It's like your genealogy, your research with your family creates a script almost for your story quilts.
well, it really does. And I have another quilt. I'd have to get up to show it to you, but one in that same line, my fourth great grandfather, I met a person who actually bought his plantation house, invited me out to visit, gave me a slave made brick, and I went out there before this person renovated the house. Amazing to walk the grounds of my enslaved uh, fourth great grandmother, as well as really my fourth great grandfather. He was my fourth great grandfather. And this was also in Louisiana. It was just a matter of these connections. I always feel like God's hand was literally in it because it wasn't by accident that I met these people. And my 10th great grandfather on my maternal side came from Ireland, sailed to America with William Penn, was a signer of the Great Charter, settled up in Newark, Delaware. I descend from this line. So the Hollingsworths are another kind of prominent family that came to America, escaping religious persecution, early Quakers, and the Gillinghams that have this connection to Woodlawn are also connected to the Hollingsworth family. I mean, what are the chances? And I've been to the Alexandria Quaker meeting, which is adjacent to Woodlawn, and I have a connection to all these places. As a military dependent, when I lived here and went to high school, we used to go to Fort Belvoir and pass Woodlawn and the Alexandria Quaker meeting all the time, never realizing that I had a family connection through my maternal side.
Wow.
Yes, so I get excited. I mean, my siblings, my daughter, a lot less excited than me, but I think it's fascinating. I mean, and we have this relationship. In DAR, I'm a chair for the Woodline. It's one of our DAR shrines, and I'm the chair, the chapter chair, and I'm going to be the state chair for Woodline. So I have this ongoing connection, and I'm going to have a permanent connection with the Alexandria meeting. I'm going to have real friends in that Quaker meeting now.
Ah, it's so cool.
And it all kind of stemmed like from the quilting, that I was able to incorporate my love for quilting, my love for research, joining the Arlington Guild. And I must say, Amy, the members of that guild are very much, to me, responsible for me having this, because I did not know how to quilt when I joined that guild. I was invited to come to the meetings anyway, and they were so generous with their knowledge and patience and encouragement when I was like, this is hard. I can't do it. My quilts are terrible. They're like, no, they're not. They're just different. This is your style. You can do this. I owe so much to them. They gave me fabric. They just were so supportive of me, as were, like, it's just funny, as were my DAR sisters, so much encouragement from these organizations during a time when people would have you think that's not happening. It is happening.
That is beautiful. And I'm so interested in hearing about your start with quilting. You really did a perfect segue to my next question, which is, had you ever, I read that you were a fine arts major in school.
Right.
So what was the creativity like? What are the quilts that you remember? Do you remember any quilts growing up? Was there quilting in your home?
No, there was no quilting in my home. My mother taught me to sew. I was a home ec major initially.
Ah,
I would use, I learned how to sew some basic things. I was a debutante. We would have talent shows, and sewing was my talent. Couldn't sing or dance. So I would make these blazers or reversible coats, something like that. But then later on in life, you know, I just always had a love for quilt. I remember the G. Benz ladies from, I believe, Mississippi, and their quilts, and how, they were very utilitarian for them. It wasn't they didn't look at them the same way we do today. Like, isn't it cool to quilt? No, it was a necessity, and they did it with scraps of fabric that they found, and just amazing. They had no idea of the treasures that they were creating, and they're in museums in New York now. People, they have workshops. But when I was thinking of my style of quilting, I just remember the simplicity of theirs. And it really inspired me. I remember during the pandemic, um, watching a documentary on those amazing women and using it as inspiration when I was making my quilts and telling my quilt stories about my family. I could see the connection there. I felt like, well, I may not have the skill level that a lot of these quilters have today, but I have the passion, and I felt like I had some creativity. And even though they weren't perfectly neat, put together quilts like a lot of the ones I saw, award-winning quilts, mine were raw edge applique. That was the style I chose to use because it was quick, it was simple, it was easy, it held my attention span. I could finish a quilt in a day, and I could tell my story as I thought it up, or if there was a piece of my history, I knew exactly how I wanted to portray it, and I could just cut it out. I have all the quilting toys, but you didn't need all that. The G's Bin ladies didn't have what we have today. It was all very simple. So I would cut my things out with scissors. I mean, I was breaking all the rules, Amy. And then I put this stuff together, and I'd come and I'd show it at one of my cousins. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is great. I'm like, no, it's got it has ravels. They're like, no, this is your style. And there was a woman in my guild, and I was telling her how I hated doing the borders. They were just hard for me, whatever. She's like, well, Sheryl, maybe your quilts don't have borders. Maybe you use the pillowcase up where you just sew it all around. Well, that's exactly what I do today. And all my quilts are like, see, no border. I sew it around. So she said, it's your style, it's your quilt, it's your art. So that stuck with me. And my fellow members just encouraged me. They created this monster. They encouraged me, and fueled by my desire to get into DAR and the frustration with the long wait, I was just taking it out on my quilts and building my stories over time. So when I finally got in 2020, let's see, this is 25, I think in 2022, when I got in, I made a quilt. I'll have to show you that later. I made a quilt of me, like as a DAR member getting in. It was a big deal.
I love how quilts, your quilting really echoes your genealogy and your participation with DAR. And when you make these quilts, like the quilt that you're sharing today, um, it's so personal and the stories are so much from your life. Um, Tell us about whether you sell the quilts or how you reconcile that part of that many quilters find themselves in with a lot of quilts. What do you do with them?
I have sold my quilts. I don't love selling my quilts because they are personal. These aren't just blocks of fabric that I can just whip up, and they don't have a piece of my heart involved. Most of them are art quilts, story quilts about my experiences, my family members, um, people I'm trying to help my daughter remember that she never met because most of them were deceased. So it's hard. I can't say I sell very many family quilts. I did sell one of my, the quilt I showed you. I did make another one and sell it to a woman in Louisiana who actually was a part of the Minden Historical Society and helped me
Mm.
find the path to my patriot and help me meet the person that, connect with the person who owned my fourth great grandfather's plantation. I mean, all these, and she was actually featured in Quilt Folk magazine. Um, and when they did Louisiana, each issue was a state, and they did Louisiana, and there she was. And I'm going to be featured in it in July for Virginia, but that's another story. But anyway, I find that it's very important for me to, I don't know, they mean something to me, and I don't sell them easily. What I will do is make prints of them. Sometimes if somebody really wants one, I'll have a print made and they can buy a print. But because they're personal, it's not like I can just always make another one and capture the feeling and the emotion that that quilt did for that specific time, because I have quilts of my parents, my mother and father holding my daughter for the first time when she was a baby. She's 29 now, but when she was a baby, and my mom died the year after she was born. So that quilt is very meaningful to me. Um, I have quilts, I made a quilt of my brother before he passed. There's just some that, hold a special meaning. I made a quilt when Justice Ginsburg died, and I have Black history related quilts, you know.
All right. I'm so sorry to cut off either of these interviews because they're so great, but I am just we want to make sure we have a little bit of time to chat. So I'm going to invite Cheryl and Tony to join me. And yeah, if you have Q&A, please feel free to drop in the Q&A. We do have one question I'll start off with to kick it off here from Nancy, which is, what do you mean by second great grandmother? That's a question for Cheryl. Does that mean great great?
Yeah, so your second great grandmother, you know who your grandmother is. Then you have your great grandmother, and her mother would be your second great grandmother.
Great. Yeah. If you're not in the genealogy world, there's lots of terminology and you get so many great greats. You got to
We
count them
just
all
count them
up.
on back. Your
Yep.
grandmother is one, your great grandmother, your second great grandmother.
Yes. Fantastic. Well, thank you both so much for sharing your story. And we have some other questions in the chat, which I'm gonna get to. I have a selfish question as the QSOS project manager, but um, what did it feel like to do, this is a question for both of you, to do this kind of oral history? Like what it was, did anything about the process surprise you?
No, nothing surprised me. Even though I'm this shy type, ha. I love telling my quilt stories, and I love encouraging other people to just try. So many people do enjoy quilts, but they're afraid to quilt, just like I was initially. Like, you've never done it. Nothing beats a failure but a try. So this whole process and being able to share that with Amy, who did a great job, I think, interviewing and pulling these stories out, was easy, and it was fun. It was my pleasure.
Fantastic.
I didn't know what the process was like. And it's kind of funny because although Cheryl and I have very, very similar stories, how we approached the project was different. I didn't know just to jump in and talk about the quilt. I'm like, I was so verbose, and I didn't know she was going to include all of that into the recording. So, but I mean, that's kind of how I feel about all of my quilts. And if it's going to be on tape, for others to see. I thought that quilt was so special, not because I think it is even my favorite quilt. It's just that the relationships were so special, and around how I got started with quilting, and why uh, it's important to kind of give honor to people, because we talk a lot about in our guild about giving the quilter uh, because I created that quilt, but Mike quilted it. And so, we have a prolific long armor in our guild, Montika Allen Atkinson, who her quilts, when we make a quilt and we put it up, even if it's a guild quilt, we say the guild created it, but Montika quilted it. So that's real important. So that quilt
Right.
brought a lot of that out of me. And I've been teaching for such a long time. I always tell people, you better put me on a timer because I can talk.
That's a useful thing when you're doing an oral history interview. That's what we want, is for people to talk. And for those of you who don't know, QSOS interviews typically start with one touchstone quilt. So we ask people to choose one quilt that's meaningful. And it's really interesting to hear what people choose. Sometimes it's not the quilt that you would expect that's their best quilt. Sometimes it's even their first quilt. And they're like, I'm embarrassed to show this, but this is what's meaningful to me. So we'll see what other questions we have here. Do have one other question for you all before we get to these other questions, which is, you both mentioned belonging to quilt guilds, and are active or have been active in quilt guilds. And I'm just wondering if you talk a little bit about yeah, what it means to have a quilting community and how that's changed your work, do you think?
Well, I think I learned a lot by being a member of a quilt guild. I didn't know anything about them. I visited a quilt show and was invited to come to a guild. And then Quilters Unlimited is a great way for people to connect with guilds in their areas, because they're all over the United States. And then once I joined a guild, each guild has its own personality, and they might do different things. There's a modern guild. There's guilds that do more traditional things. So you can jump around to different, you can join multiple guilds. I have friends that go to a guild meeting every day. So there's all kinds of influences and exposure that you get from being in a guild. I mean, just imagine the skill level. I mean, whatever you want to do or learn how to do, there's somebody there that knows how to do it and do it well. And just the generosity is amazing, how people give you supplies and fabric and teach you. I mean, people pay to learn how to do a lot of the things that people freely, other quilters freely show you how to do by joining a guild. It's a great way to have a nice circle of creative people and friends.
In the rest of my video, you're going to see a shout out to my guild that I helped to found. I used to call myself the founder, but I'm not the founder because you can't have a guild without people. Otherwise, I would be quilting by myself. So on this call, there's my nieces and my family. So everyone in my guild is my family. And as far as Junction City, Kansas, Texas, there's Deb in Texas, there's Montika in Kansas, and then here Wanda in New Jersey, and then my folks here in Indianapolis, Nita, Kita, Barb. I don't know who else is on this call. Stacy was trying to get in, but they're just supportive. They're family. Yesterday, two family members, Verna and that were over to the house sewing. So when you talked about the skill set, Cheryl, that you get from a guild member, every summer we have our June retreat, and Montika and Barb bring out the dyes and the techniques that fuel us for the rest of the year. And then, Cheryl, you also brought up the fact that COVID, the good thing about COVID is that we were allowed to tap into other guilds. And last week, I paid my membership to the Brown Sugar Stitchers in Atlanta, and to the Princeton Sankofa Stitchers in New Jersey, and to the National African American Quilt Guild. And I just joined SACWA. So, we were allowed to branch out and meet all of these fantastic people in guilds. And I didn't even know what a guild was, and well into the quilting thing. But I tell you this, the camaraderie and fellowship that come from the people that I get to call my quilty sisters is everything to me. Yeah, everything to me. So if you can find a great guild where people get to, because Cheryl and I even talked about this just recently. I told her, Cheryl, quit saying your little quilts, your little quilts. You have found your niche. You have found your thing that makes you special. And when you call yourself an artist or a quilter, you're putting you out there. And if you have this group of people who say, oh, I love what you do. Oh, I support that. Or, oh, I got some fabric you can borrow or have. Or Stacy will go to Ghana and she'll come back and with a suitcase full of fabric and bring some over and just share it at the meetings. And Barb, I still have a whole lot of her dyed thread that she hasn't asked back.
Truth comes out.
No, that's exactly right. I have friends from my guild, and you'll end up with quilting friends from all over the country, because you never met a quilter you didn't like. But when my friends travel, they do
Yeah,
bring me back fabric from Africa or
yeah,
the Netherlands or wherever they've been. It's
yeah.
really quite amazing. And, it really helps build your stash.
Yeah, all over the world. Yeah, and then there are people like you said, Wanda will just say to me, "Oh, do you know this quilter? Do you know this thing? You need to do this thing." So when you have people who aren't willing to gatekeep, it really expands your horizons and makes you a more skilled quilter because you're exposed to so many other things. I didn't know about Quilt Alliance. I didn't know about SACWA. I didn't know about all of. I still call myself being fairly new to quilting. This is my 11th year, and it's because of all of those sisters out there in the world who said, "Hey, try this. Look at this. Come see this. Come into QuiltCon this year." So those kinds of things just make you a better, well-rounded quilter.
Yeah. We have room for just a couple more quick questions. Susan has a question for Tony that says, can you tell us about what you wrote around the edge of your quilt, and what it means to you?
Mm-hmm. It comes from me being a academic, but it's basically just reimagining myself as a constant, or changing myself is a constant reimagining of the intellectual constructs I've been taught. That's just my fancy way of saying that I constantly call myself not a teacher, but a student. And with that quilt, that was the quilt that the G-Spin cousins, Petway cousins, were like, quit reading other people's stuff, try something new. I learned how to do lettering. The neat thing about that quilt is that Mike quilted it, but he didn't quilt it on a long arm. He quilted it on a domestic,
Oh,
and an old domestic. I mean, he was fabulous. So, so much came from that. And that was just my way of saying that I am constantly a student, and I love learning. And we grow up with thoughts in our head about this is the way it is because so and so said it this way. And if you keep your mind open, you'll learn something new every day, literally.
That's so true. I love the theme of continuing to learn for both of you in your interviews. Okay, this is the last one we've got time for. I'm so sorry, but um, let's see. There was one question for Cheryl that is, can you tell us a little bit about the process you use to create prints of your quilts?
It's not really that involved. You can have prints made through outside services, but it worked out for me because I just take photos of my work
Mhm.
and can have prints made. And it worked out because I have such a hard time parting with my quilts. But I did one for a DAR friend and I enlarged it and was so nice. I ended up making one for myself. I was telling Tony that I made one for myself because I had only made smaller prints initially. Um, I had made duplicate quilts out of a few, like the Justice Ginsburg quilt and the one of my second great grandmother. But that gets old and it starts feeling like a job, and like I said, doesn't capture the same thing as when you do it initially. But by making the prints, it's easy to send those to people, and because they're on canvas, they still have the quilt look. You have the fabric feel of it. It works out very nicely.
Yeah, great. Well, I'm going to share contact information for both of our interviewees today really quick. So take it down, and you'll see this again in the recording, which will come out in about 24 hours. So feel free to reach out. They've very generously agreed to let us share their email addresses. And I wish we had more time to talk. We wanted to show as much of the interview as possible. We'll share those links again, and you'll see them in the recording. But thank you, Cheryl and Tony, for joining us. We so appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you,
Um,
you.
everybody.
yes, and I hope you all will join us for future Textile Talks. The one coming up next week is called Emiko Fujimoto Quilts' Living History, presented by Sakwa. And we've got some other really exciting talks coming up again. I think Dr. Dickerson might be on a future Textile Talk too, and I hope we'll see all of you coming up soon. So thank you so much for joining us, and I'll play
Thank
our
you.
little outro here. But yeah, please all be in touch and stay safe in the winter weather if it's happening where you are. So thank you.
Bye,
Yeah.
Tony.
Bye, Cheryl.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Hi, Emma. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.